Welcome back, everyone.
Hey guys, this is Rita.
This is Amanda, and you're listening to I Don't Know Her, the podcast where we talk about women you've probably never heard of, but you should have.
And you will.
Today, at least.
At this moment.
At this moment in time. So we were trying to come up with ideas for just like little warm-up chat before we dive into these badass ladies that we're going to talk about. And I asked Rita if she'd seen any clips from the VMAs this last weekend.
I haven't seen a thing.
Yeah, and it was so incredible, and you should watch it because like Lizzo put on an incredible performance, and of course, if you've been listening to our podcast, you know that we're Lizzo fans.
We're obsessed.
And also, I just want to point out that I am not a bandwagoner. I have been on the Lizzo train since 2015, and you all are late to the party. So
I can vouch for that.
And I have been like, you know, indoctrinating my friends to be Lizzo fans for years. And now finally you're all on board. Okay, good. But she sang Good as Hell. Well, actually, she sang like a little bit of a medley. But the Good as Hell part was probably the most memorable because she had her and her dancers come out and she was dressed all in yellow and they were all in like spandex onesies that look like clouds.
Oh, okay.
And so she was the sun.
Yeah.
And at the end, she stands in the middle. And you know, the song Good as Hell is all about, you know, no matter what, specifically, it's like a breakup song. Like, no matter what this asshole thinks, you're good as hell. Mm-hmm. And so, but it's like a really uplifting song in general. And she's a very like inspirational person.
She is.
And she's really embraced that as part of her identity. And so this culmination of her performance is her standing in the middle and all of these dancers sort of laying on each other, and then the last two are in the center with her and they're laying on her, and they're all smiling with their eyes closed.
Oh,
it's really peaceful and cool.
Yeah.
And there was also a giant inflatable ass.
I think I did see something about a giant inflatable ass, but it was on a glimpse in the Instagram world.
So there were a couple of cool things about the VMAs this year. I mean, Lizzo was one, but also Missy Elliott did a medley performance as well. And I loved Missy Elliott when I was younger.
So did I.
And you know, it's like I stopped listening to her when I probably was in my mid-20s. Not because I disliked her music anymore, but because it just didn't fit the kind of lifestyle I was leading now. Like, I guess I just sort of was like, oh, well, I'm not dancing at the club anymore. And that's really what I, you know, listen to Missy's songs for. But now they have this like incredible nostalgic quality to them, but also they're really good songs still.
Yeah, there's something to get down to.
Yeah, they hold up.
Yeah.
They really hold up. And so her performance was great. And then have you heard of Normani?
Normani, no.
Did you ever listen to the group Fifth Harmony?
Oh, I didn't really listen to them, but I know of them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of where I was at. I was like, they came out past the time when I would have known girl groups kind of situation.
Okay.
So they're still quite young. And one of the girls in that group is named Normani, and she just came out with her first single and the video that came along with it. And it was this nostalgic 90s throwback video.
Nice.
And everything about it was amazing. And the song is a total earworm that every time I'm like even remotely thinking about it, I have it stuck in my head for hours. But in the video, she does this cool, so she's an incredible dancer. So she's dancing the whole video. And in the one part of the video, someone throws a basketball and she like does some moves with her, like one with her foot, and then bumps it off her butt and makes it into the basket. And it is so silly, but also such a cool move.
Do you remember in the 90s when everybody was like into really like satiny short tracksuits?
They're wearing them in this.
That's exactly like what people are wearing now. It's the chokers are back, the fanny packs are back, satin is back, tube socks.
Velour.
Yeah, velour is back.
Today, two girls walked into my library, high school girls wearing velour tracksuits. And I was like,
the fuck?
Oh, the 90s are back.
Oh, shit. I was just waiting for everyone to start wearing that frosting again. Remember frosting makeup?
Oh.
Where you just look like you had been hit with like 1,000 moths on your face.
Yeah, the frosted
Very
lip colors.
frosty, icy blue, icy pink.
Oh, I loved though. Like that was middle school for me because I remember I had remember baby doll t-shirts?
Yes, absolutely.
So I had a like satiny spandex baby blue baby doll t-shirt with, you remember it was also really popular then to have those like plastic graphics,
Oh God, yes. They would like crack if you put them in the dryer.
Yes. And then you tie your hair up in those little knots that Gwen Stefani used to do.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it was a bad
Put your
time.
beanie on and be like, oh my God, I'm so international
I'm
now.
appropriating culture and it's so cute.
They still do that. Talking to you, festival goers.
I felt like, but the whole reason I brought up the VMAs is because I felt like it was such an example of like totally powerful, amazing women doing their thing and rocking the VMAs. And there were performances by men, but nobody was talking about them the next day. Nobody was like, whose performance rocked? Shawn Mendes.
I don't even know who that is.
He's not worth your time.
Okay. I love it.
So I just thought, I was like, yeah, that's a good topic to talk about.
Right on.
Girl power. We're bringing about the 90s.
Girl power with 4 R's.
Riot girl.
Yes, I was going to say, where my zines at?
So tell me about your lady today. Short, long, sad, happy?
Well, mine's short because I'm trying to trim mine down. I had that in mind of like, oh, cool, I'm going to keep this short on purpose. But then like, I love this lady, but there's like not enough out there about her. And I was so frustrated, but I was still like, you know what? I'm going to gather as much as I can. And I'm still going to bring this lady to my forefront. But she is an artist.
So I also wanted to do someone shorter. And so I thought, hey, a pro wrestler no one ever heard of. That's going to be easy. It's going to be so fast. And then it got deeper and more complicated. And I was like, I am now suddenly in conspiracy land. Like crazy.
Ooh.
So maybe I'll go first this time and we'll get the long one out of the way.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Damn printer. Okay, I'm going to talk about Mary Lillian Ellison, otherwise known as the Fabulous Moolah.
I don't know her.
I didn't think so. Although,
do I strike you as a pro wrestler fan?
Weirder things would come out of your mouth. I mean, I didn't peg you.
Don't you say it. I know what you're going to say.
Okay. She was one of the most successful professional wrestlers in American history. And we're all on the same page here. We're talking about like WWF wrestling.
I was going to say.
We're not talking about like Olympic wrestling.
Yes.
So here's the thing about Moolah's story. I have to tell it a little differently because she had this like long life, long career, long legacy. And then after she died, all of these people, or towards the end of her life, and then after she died, all these people came out of the woodwork and they were like, let me tell you the real story. So because that's how most people who were fans and historians of wrestling found out about this information, that's the way you're going to find out about it too.
Okay.
So you can decide once I get done what you think the truth is.
Okay.
So Mary Lillian Ellison was born on July 22nd, 1923 in South Carolina. She grew up in a small community called Tukey-Doo.
Really?
Which was just outside of the city of Columbia. She was the 13th child in her family and the only
13.
daughter.
Whoa.
12 brothers.
12 brothers?
Ooh.
Jesus Christ.
Her family owned a cotton farm, and so she was expected to help pick cotton as soon as she could walk. And so she was probably like 6 or 7 when she starts picking cotton. And when she's 8 years old, her mom dies. And of course, her mom is the only other woman in her family. So like, that's really tough on her. And she was devastated. So her dad was like, what's the one thing I can do to cheer up my daughter? I know. Bring her to professional wrestling matches.
Oh, that's such a dad thing.
Yeah. So at 10 years old, he starts bringing her into Columbia to watch these pro wrestling matches, right? Which even in this day, they were maybe more athletic than what more about athleticism, but there was still a lot of showmanship.
I was going to say, yeah.
So she went in to see these matches, but there was one match in particular that totally changed her life. She got to see Mildred Burke wrestle.
That name sounds familiar.
I was going to talk about Mildred Burke on a different episode, and then there just wasn't very much about her. But her story kind of intertwines with and parallels Moolah's. So I'm just basically going to do hers really fast.
Okay.
And then you're going to see eventually why I felt the need to do that. So Mildred was the reigning women's champion when Lily watched her wrestle. She was one of the first women who ever did the sport, and she took it really seriously. She was a really well-built, super muscular girl, and in fact, her photo on her Wikipedia page is hot. I would be hitting on her. When Mildred was determined to get into the sport of wrestling, there was one man who was training women wrestlers, and so he held all the keys to the kingdom. His name was Billy Wolfe, and his name might sound familiar because later on he becomes a music producer that became very famous. Okay. And that's how I was like, Billy Wolfe, that name is super familiar. And that's why. So he is the only guy that is training women wrestlers. And he did not want to take Mildred on. But she finally convinced him by body slamming a dude that he should train her. And so he did. And of course, as they became closer together in this training relationship, they ended up married. So now he's her husband and he's her trainer. And he is also training other women. So he helped her get higher up in the wrestling world, but he was also a really fucking shitty dude. Aww. So he was really well known as a womanizer. And he basically was having sex with all of the girls he was training. So eventually Mildred was like, fuck you, dude. Yeah, I'm out.
I'm over this.
And she left him and she went out on her own. But he was still the man in control of this entire part of the industry. And so he sort of blackballed her for years. Even still, though, she started her own association called the World Women's Wrestling Association and the International Women's Wrestlers. And she spread women's wrestling across the world and actually sort of helped start the phenomenon that became very popular in Japan. And she died in 1989.
Whoa.
Okay, so back to Moolah. Now you know a little bit about Mildred Burke. So Lillian sees her and immediately is like, that's what I want to do with my life. I want to be like Mildred Burke. But before her potential career could even get off the ground, it almost becomes completely derailed.
What happened?
Because when Lillian is just 14 years old, she graduates from high school and marries 21-year-old Walter Carroll.
She's 14?
14.
How do you graduate from high school when you're 14?
I don't know. How do you marry a 21-year-old when you're 14?
Ugh.
And together they had a daughter, which she named Marietta Austin. And just a few months later, they get divorced.
Huh.
So by the time she's 15 years old, she is a mother and a divorcee.
Wow. It's getting it.
Yeah.
That's a very grown-up situation for a very young girl.
Exactly. And she still is like, well, I have a whole life I want to lead. So she's like, I still want to wrestle. Leaves her daughter with a friend, I guess.
Okay.
And decides to set out in the wrestling world. And at first she is on the fringes. And she makes her way to none other than Mildred Burke's training center.
Okay.
And she trains with Mildred Burke and becomes one of Billy Wolfe's girls.
Oh, no. Like girls?
Well, you'll find out.
Okay.
So Lillian fought her first match in 1949 against a woman named June Byers, who was a really professional, really well trained at that time. And at just 5 feet 4 inches and 118 pounds, Lillian wasn't much of a match against June, and she ended up losing. As I mentioned earlier about Wolfe being a womanizer, that was, like I said, an understatement. He was not just having sex with his trainees. There was more to it. So when Lillian started working for Mildred and Billy Wolfe, he started to introduce her to the ways.
Okay.
And he often told his trainees that they were not just to have sex with him, but they were supposed to have sex with the promoters as well. The other promoters.
Oh, that's sleazy.
So that they could get ahead in the business. So he's kind of pimping these women out, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like they have much of a choice.
No, because imagining he's making money too.
Oh, of course.
Off of this.
Yeah. And the only way they get paid is if he gets paid.
Mm-hmm.
When he pressured Lillian to do the same, she refused. And ultimately, she ended up leaving Mildred and Billy to start out on her own. For years, she was unable to get in the ring. She was just continuously on the fringes. And she often served at what was called a valet. So I had to look that up. I had a pretty good idea of what I thought it was, and I was right. Did you ever see, like, I used to like to watch wrestling when I was a kid, the Hulk Hogan days.
Yeah.
And the valets were these women who would, like, walk on with a man, like with a male wrestler. And they would be, like, completely scantily clad.
Yeah.
Like maybe wearing a bikini, and they would just be like promoting this dude and like, look how powerful he is.
Or I can imagine like when they walk down into the ring, these girls are on the side by side.
Yes.
And kind of,
they're side by side with the wrestler.
Yeah.
So she was a valet, and that's what she did. And at that point, she was given the name Slave Girl Moolah.
Really?
Isn't that awful?
That is so awful.
When asked later how she earned the name, I guess the moolah part, she said she was asked why she wanted to wrestle, and she responded, "For the money. I want to wrestle for the moolah." She worked for male wrestlers as their valet, such as a man named Elephant Boy.
These are terrible.
They're terrible. How about Elephant Boy and Nature Boy? Like you couldn't come up with anything a little more imaginative,
something a little more crazy,
a little more creative. Yeah, Elephant Boy and then Nature Boy, whose real name was Buddy Rogers. Elephant Boy's real name was Tony Olivas, and Olivas was a dark-skinned Mexican man competing on the wrestling circuit in the early 1950s. And his valet was Moolah, who was a white woman. As part of their routine, Moolah kissed him on the cheek when they entered the ring.
Oh, I bet that was not well received.
Once in Oklahoma, after she planted the kiss on his cheek, a man tried to stab her for kissing who he thought was a black man.
Oh my God.
And I actually kind of wonder, I right before we decided to record today, I was like, I kind of want to see what he looked like, because they called him a dark-skinned Mexican man.
Yeah, well, I'm there's assuming like maybe almost looking like maybe Dominican or Cuban.
Maybe, but so I looked him up, and he had like big hair. I mean, he styled it like almost like an afro. I was like, maybe he's just Afro-Latino.
Yeah.
Like, maybe he just was. Because they also touted him all the time as being South African. But I don't think he actually was. He was born in Ojai. Like, he was in Ojai, California. I think he grew up in Ojai, but he was born in Ventura.
Yeah.
He eventually went on to become a priest. Fun fact.
Whoa.
When he was 76. He moved back to, I think, Mexico. He moved to Mexico and became a priest.
Jesus.
So anyway, this is a wild time. Moolah then decided that she could make more money as a manager. So she decided to convince Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers, that she should be his manager. And then she started to be able to convince other guys that she should manage them. And when she was shopping these talent around to promoters, she demanded top dollar for them. And she became known as a shrewd businesswoman and a promoter, which is smart on her part. She's probably making a lot more money that way.
Yeah, and you also start to buzz about yourself too. You're like, oh, that's the one, That's
Moolah.
Mm-hmm.
Moolah didn't work with Nature Boy for long because he, like Billy Wolf, pressured her to have a sexual relationship with him, which she refused. Moolah, and I'm gonna skip across some of her marriages. Just let it be known. Let it be known that she got married a couple times. Moolah was tired of being on the sidelines, and she started shopping around for a promoter who would get her in the ring instead of it being the other way around. Mm-hmm. After a short stint with some Boston guys, she made her way to Vince McMahon Sr., who at that time owned Capital Wrestling Corporation in 1955. He was the king of the wrestling business, and it didn't take long for Moolah to make her way into the spotlight. He renamed her the Fabulous Moolah, thank God, because Slave Girl Moolah was not working for me.
That's not, yeah.
So he renamed her the Fabulous Moolah, and in 1956, she defeated Judy Grable in a battle royal to win the Women's World Championship. So there she is. Now she's on top.
Yeah.
Having grown up with 12 brothers, Moolah knew how to fight dirty. And I think you're going to enjoy this.
Yeah.
And when she realized that audiences love to hate a villain, she knew exactly what to do. So she had an anything goes attitude and became a pioneer in dirty fighting tactics. So I'm going to play a little clip of her talking about some of her like tactics that she did, because some of them I'm like, is that not illegal?
I'd fix up a little spoon handle, about the size of your finger, roll it up with tape, and put it down in my bra.
The meaner she was, the more they liked it, and she loved being a heel.
Stick it in the eyes, in the throat. Ah!
The Fabulous Moolah.
Stick it in the eyes, stick it in the throat.
I like that cackle too. Just like, I got away with it. Yeah, what of it?
In 2005, she said this about audiences who booed her. I love when they get mad at me. They called me all kinds of names. I said, call me anything you want. You don't write my check.
Ooh, I love that. I love that.
She's feisty. So after winning Moolah's first championship title, she reigned as the top woman wrestler for over 10 years.
Wow.
But wrestling wasn't all she was doing. In the 1950s, she met a fellow wrestler named Buddy Lee. And the two of them, actually, Buddy Lee is the one who ended up being a music guy, I think. I don't know, one of them did. The two of them started dating and soon became business partners and spouses, just like Billy Wolf and Mildred Burke.
Mm-hmm.
As Billy Wolf went out of the wrestling business at this point, Moolah and Lee set their sights on being the dominant couple that was promoting female wrestlers. They called their business Girl Wrestling Enterprises. Moolah was really demanding of the girls. She said they had to look good at all times. They had to have their hair done. They had to have makeup on. And especially her one rule was that they act like a lady. That meant don't date men in the business.
Okay.
In the 1960s, they expanded their business into what was then called midget wrestling. I'm so sorry. I understand that is not an appropriate term. It's just still, it was what was called at the time, and that's... Anyway, Moolah became really close to one of the wrestlers that she trained in that sector of the wrestling world. And her name was Katie Glass, and she went by the stage name of Diamond Lil. And she'll come back later, so keep her in mind, Diamond Lil. Moolah was not only the reigning women's champion, but she also at this point was becoming kind of a celebrity. And she was rubbing elbows with like Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis. Yeah,
I can imagine around that time, entertainment, especially sensationalized entertainment, was huge.
Yeah, and I think that I think it had its pop culture kind of following. In 1967, she lost her world championship title to a woman named Bette Boucher, but regained it just weeks later. And then she reigned again as champion for another 8 years. So we're up to 18 years at this point. That pretty much uncontested. Women's wrestling was still illegal in many states, including New York in 1970s. In the 1970s. That's crazy to me. So McMahon, and this is McMahon Sr., and Moolah were determined to change that, and they did in June 1972. And so just a month later, on July 1st, 1972, Lillian, the Fabulous Moolah Ellison, became the first woman to wrestle at Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
And it was sold out. In 1978, she lost her championship match to Evelyn Stevens for 2 days, and then gained it back and kept it for another 6 years. So at this point, was it 18 plus 6? So it's 24 years, right?
Yeah.
At this point, she's 55 years old.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She also held the Women's World Tag Team Championship twice. So at this point, Vince McMahon Sr. is kind of working his way out of his corporation, and Vince McMahon Jr. is waking his way up.
Okay.
And that's the guy we all know. We all know who Vince McMahon is because he was huge in the 80s and 90s and even is now. I mean, he's got a lot of control, but he's really well known as being a dick.
Ooh.
Like, but a very good promoter of wrestling. So he had started to become the leader, and he convinced Moolah to sell her rights to the world championship to him. So she did. And in exchange, she would appear exclusively for them, which automatically was for the WWF, which is what it was renamed, the World Wrestling Federation. And that automatically made her the first WWF Women's World Champion.
Okay.
So it was like a win-win for her. She gets to keep her title. Here's where shit starts to get weird, because the 80s were wild. And
I'm imagining a lot of influences of the nose candy variety.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Have you watched the TV show Glow?
I have, yeah.
I have not. And so I'm wondering if some of the stuff that's going to happen in the 80s, if you're like, oh yeah, I can see that happening.
Okay.
So Cyndi Lauper.
Okay.
We're taking a left turn here. Cyndi Lauper was apparently a big fan of wrestling and met Lou Albano, who was a male wrestler at the time, on a flight, and they decided that they should work together in the wrestling business.
Okay.
And they like made up a feud against each other. And so Lou Albano said he was going to train Moolah or something, and Cyndi Lauper was going to get her own girl, and they were going to duke it out. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway.
You would be a terrible promoter.
My half-hearted punches.
She did this real kind of old-timey punch.
Well, you see here.
I'll butter your cornbread.
Gotta give them a right and a left. Okay.
Okay.
So Cyndi Lauper is like interested, and Vince McMahon is like, fuck yes.
Okay.
You know why? Because Cyndi Lauper has music videos, and MTV is very popular at this point.
Oh.
So he's like, this is the way to rope in those younger, cooler generations into the wrestling world. And it fucking worked.
Wow.
Because that's around the time that like Hulk Hogan had his morning cartoons, and like we were all watching MTV and our,
Yeah.
So it worked. And so Cyndi Lauper starts training this woman named Wendy Richter to be her wrestler. And because Cyndi Lauper knows that the woman to beat is the Fabulous Moolah, she sets up the fight that it's going to be between Moolah and her girl Wendy.
Okay.
And Vince McMahon is like, yes, this is perfect. So on July 23rd, 1984, MTV aired The Brawl to End It All. And it was a live match between the Fabulous Moolah and Wendy Richter. And Moolah, as had been sort of arranged, Moolah lost to Richter and handed over her championship, which she'd held for almost 28 continuous years.
Wow.
The fight was the most watched program in MTV history.
Wow.
I know, and I'm like, well, I still don't know. I was 1 year old though. So. Moolah didn't want to go out like that though. She got real weird about it once she lost her title. And she,
like almost like she sold her soul kind of thing.
And she had trained Wendy Richter.
Oh.
And they had not gotten along when she was her trainer. So there was already a little bit of bad blood. And Wendy Richter like sold herself and she was very beautiful, tall, young, voluptuous, muscular, athletic. And Moolah was
in her 50s.
In her 50s. Actually, she's in her 60s at this point.
Whoa, okay.
Because in 1978, she was 55. And it's 1984 when she loses the championship. So that's 6 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she's 61.
She's not looking,
She's not a spry young thing. But nonetheless, like, she couldn't not have control.
Yeah.
So
it was hers. She had worked so hard for it. I could imagine.
Yeah. So she goes to Vince McMahon and she's like, I need it. I'm going to get it back. You got to help me. So Wendy Richter knows that she is going to be in this match that is the championship match. But normally those things, like everybody kind of knows how it's going to end. But she does not know. And in the ring walks the Spider Lady, who she has wrestled before. But this time, the Spider Lady, who's wearing a mask and like a bodysuit head to toe, you can't see anything, has like a different frame than she was used to. She was like, this is weird. And she claims to this day that she didn't know that it was Moolah in the suit, but I find that hard to believe.
Okay.
Because she even saw her at some point, like backstage before the match and stuff, and was like, well, that's weird. Moolah doesn't usually come to events she's not wrestling in. So what she didn't know, though, was that everybody had sort of set this up. That everybody was in on it except for Wendy. So Moolah pinned her to the ground in a pretty regular maneuver. Wendy is kicking out and about to go up, but the ref is in on it and goes, 1, 2, 3, pinned.
Wow.
And so Richter loses her championship. And this is known as the original screw job.
Oh, no.
And Wendy is fucking pissed. She walks out of the arena, still in her wrestling gear, gets in a cab, drives to the airport, and fucking leaves.
Oh, jeez.
And she did not come back.
Oh, wow.
She basically didn't wrestle at all very much after that.
She's over it.
Moolah, though, didn't last long in this wrestling championship. She actually lost it on purpose in 1987 and went into semi-retirement. And now she's in her mid-60s. Good God. Mm. She still made many appearances on the WWF. Whenever they had major televised events, she was almost always there, making appearances of some kind. So her and her husband had bought a large property outside of Columbia, South Carolina, which they turned into a training compound. So they had their house, they had a ton of property, and then they started building these smaller houses, and they turned a barn into a gym, a training gym. And these little houses is where the girls would live that they were training.
Yeah.
So that they invited women to come and live and train on their property, and they helped them begin their career in wrestling and navigate what was a pretty treacherous business. So in the 90s, she spent most of her time training other wrestlers, and she started even training some men, men who were intentionally supposed to be the losers in matches. So they didn't make very much money, but she sure did. She also founded what was known then as the Ladies International Wrestling Association, which was a nonprofit to help retired pro wrestlers, which is kind of cool.
That's kind of cool, yeah.
She ended up with 4 failed marriages, including her marriage to Buddy Lee, who, just like Billy Wolf, was a bit too close to some of their female trainees. And when she came home and caught him in bed with one of their wrestlers named Rita Cortez, Rita,
oops,
she sent him packing. In 1995, she was inducted into the WWF, which is now known as the WWE, Hall of Fame, and she was the first woman ever to be nominated and voted in.
Wow.
After her induction, she began appearing on television with fellow veteran Mae Young, who was also old as shit. They're now in their 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And they're getting in the ring. It's all showmanship, right? But they're old as hell. And they're getting in the ring and taking guitar smashes. And this maneuver called an RKO, which I had to watch 1,000 times and wonder how you don't die doing, where you wrap your opponent's head in your arm and then throw them down with their necks. And these elderly ladies
are doing this.
She ended up writing a memoir about herself called The First Goddess of the Squared Circle. And she was featured in a 2004 documentary called Lipstick and Dynamite. She had 2 very special relationships that did stand the test of time. One of them was with Katie Glass, who was known as Diamond Lil, and they had kind of a mother-daughter relationship. Diamond Lil called her Ma, and they lived together for over 40 years.
Oh, wow.
And in 1991, Mae Young moved in with her as well. And though it's never been confirmed, many suspect the 2 women were more than just wrestling partners. Or maybe they were leg wrestling. Lillian Ellison, the Fabulous Moolah, died on November 2nd, 2007 at the age of 84 in Columbia, South Carolina. She was buried in a family plot that contains a spot for her daughter Marietta, her maybe partner Mae Young, and Katie Glass.
Wow.
Okay. Are you ready for the twist?
Yeah. All right. Lay it on me.
This is about to be bananas.
Okay.
So part 1 of her story makes her a powerhouse badass who's super inspiring and fought her way to the top and helped other women.
Yeah.
Right?
Wrong?
Okay.
Ish? Maybe?
According to many of the wrestlers who were brought to train at her compound, Moolah never actually trained them. She never even stepped foot in the gym. She would make other girls train the new girls, and then those women did not get paid for their work as trainers. In addition, she wouldn't sign a girl unless they agreed to come and live on the compound and train in her facilities, which you're like, okay, that's not so bad.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as they did, Moolah became their booker and received 25% of their booking fees.
That's big.
And
big
since
bite.
they were required to live on her property, they were also responsible for paying rent and utilities. They were also required to pay a $500 training fee up front. The small houses had 4 bedrooms, and each one of them had to pay her $300 a month in rent.
Whoa.
That means she was getting at least $1,200 a month, plus 25% of their booking fees, and 20% of their overall pay, plus $500 training fee. And this was in the 80s.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
It's a fuck ton of money. One wrestler, Mad Maxine, who I do remember. Did you ever know Mad Maxine?
No.
She had a mohawk. It was amazing. She was hot. Mad Maxine said that many trainees were in the hole before they even started and had to earn their way out, which meant that Moolah basically owned these women for years. Maxine said that Moolah took half of all of her earnings.
Yikes.
Yeah. Another wrestler named Debbie Johnson said Moolah took so much of her money through a 30% booking fee, travel expenses, food, rent, utilities, etc., that she ended up working for Moolah for 2 years before earning a single dollar.
My God.
Yeah.
That's not cool.
It's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Many of Moolah's former trainees also complained about the conditions in which they trained. So I told you that it was in the barn, right? That they'd converted a barn. So the barn didn't have any heating or air conditioning. And they would train for 5 to 6 hours straight with no food, water, or bathroom breaks.
That's crazy.
Now we're getting into inhumane conditions.
Exactly.
Yeah. One wrestler, known then as Princess Victoria, broke her neck during a match when a fellow wrestler stumbled and landed on her head. She was in the hospital one moment, and when she woke up, she was back at the compound and not in the hospital.
Okay.
She has a broken neck. Okay. So Moolah made her get up and come back to the gym with a broken neck, and just to see if she could, quote, take a bump.
Whoa.
After each one of the bumps, Princess was in excruciating pain. She described it as feeling like things were exploding inside of her head.
Ugh.
Oh, just the thought of it makes me like...
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Since Princess was not able to make any money for Moolah as a wrestler, Moolah set up an arrangement for her. And I'm going to play a little clip so you can see what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Moo comes to me one day. She said, hon, if you go see this guy in Holland, he'll give you payday. I thought to myself, I can't wrestle, might as well. I get on the phone with this guy, and I make it explicitly clear. It's separate motel rooms. The conversation after I hung up from him with Moo was, you know, hon, the nicer you are to him, the bigger your payday will be. And you could really use a payday.
And so was Moolah sort of insinuating like the idea that...
When Moolah looked at me and said, you know, the nicer you are to him, the nicer he'll be to you. What else can I say? When this guy first picked me up at the airport, I said, damn, this guy didn't get beat by the ugly stick. He got beat by the whole damn forest. I wake up the next morning, I catch him right here, and I grab his hand, and I'm holding it. I said, dude, I will break your wrist. And she was fire engine red pissed when I got back. I can't believe she didn't sleep with him. Well, not a week after I got back is when Moo came to me and said, look, you can't wrestle and I need my rent. I'll take that yellow outfit. I'll take the brown outfit that she gave me for Christmas. I left the property that day with my Chevy Malibu station wagon and 20 bucks in my pocket. She dumped me, and I never wrestled again.
Yikes.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not done.
Okay.
So it turns out that Princess Victoria wasn't the first woman for which Moolah had made this kind of arrangement. Wrestler Penny Banner called Moolah a straight-up pimp
Really?
who rented trainees out to promoters and male wrestlers. She also said that the women weren't told ahead of time what was happening when they were sent out on tours. And so some of them had no idea what they were expected to do. So she said this, those who refused to have sex with wrestlers and promoters were raped.
I was going to say, I could see where that was going.
Some of the most salacious and serious allegations came from the family of Sweet Georgia Brown, who was an African-American woman who trained with Moolah and Buddy Lee. The sons and daughters of Sweet Georgia Brown claimed that their mother was frequently raped, forced to drink alcohol and take pills, and that Moolah and Buddy Lee used addiction to control her. Her family said that when she was home briefly between tours, she was pregnant every time. The family is unsure who the fathers of the children are. And because she would leave them behind to be taken care of by her siblings and whatever, so they were like in their aunts and uncles' care and with their cousins, they were all lighter skinned. And they were not treated well by their cousins and aunts and uncles. They were made to sleep on the floor. They weren't given as much food. They were, just treated like they were animals a lot of the time. And they also, sort of insinuated that their mother was a whore. So they grew up with this like really shitty contextual relationship with their mother's wrestling career. So her youngest kid, Michael, has spent the last few years trying to determine who his father is. When he got in touch with Moolah, and it was towards the end of her life, and he got in touch with her and he was like, hey, can I come see you? And she was like, yeah, sure. So he goes out there and he sees her and he's like, do you have any idea who my father is? And she brought him over to a picture of Buddy Lee with his mother. And she just pointed.
Ooh.
Insinuating that Buddy Lee was Michael's father.
Yeah.
But no one ever confirmed it. And he was working on getting some DNA testing, but I'm not sure if he ever got that process done. Like I think he got DNA tested, but I think he needed like more people to get tested to figure out if
where
he
they
was
do that reverse testing. Yeah.
Another wrestler named Haida Martinez had similar allegations about Moolah using the girls as sexual favors, as did Luna Vachon, who came forward in 2002. Additionally, as we saw with like the situation with Wendy Richter, when she couldn't stand somebody else being the championship, she was accused of basically manipulating the entire women's wrestling industry so that it was impossible for any other woman to do it.
Wow.
And this guy named Jim Cornette, he's a wrestling historian and a former manager. He said this: for the better part of 25 years, every top girl wrestler was trained by Moolah, booked out by Moolah, and was controlled by Moolah's group. She was one of the most powerful women in the wrestling business. If you were a female wrestler in the business and you wanted to get work, you pretty much had to go through Moolah or you weren't going to get work.
Wow. She just became as bad as the people that she hated.
I think she became what she was taught.
Yeah.
As a result of all of these allegations, though, the Fabulous Moolah's reputation and legacy has been tarnished. And in March of 2018, the WWE, so they had this male battle royale that they had named after Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
And they wanted to do the same with the women's. And they were like, oh, who better than the Fabulous Moolah?
Yeah.
Well, when the announcement was made and it hit the internet, controversy blew the fuck up, because by this point there had been plenty of articles and information out there about how Moolah, even if you determined that she hadn't done all of these terrible things with the sex stuff, she definitely did swindle people out of a lot of money. So 2 days later, they renamed the match WrestleMania Women's Battle Royale. Instead of the Fabulous Moolah Memorial Battle.
What are we going to do?
There are many, many other wrestlers, just FYI, both men and women, who have come to her defense, particularly when it comes to the pimping allegations. Some have admitted that she was shady with money, but she wasn't as devious as others have painted her to be. So I want to leave you with one last quote, and it's from Princess Victoria, who we heard from earlier, who talked about the broken neck and the guy in Holland. And this is what she had to say about the way that things have come out regarding Fabulous Moolah.
Okay.
If I choose not to like her because of what she did to me, that's fine. But Moolah needs to be remembered. She was an icon in this business. You can't take away her history just because she's an asshole.
All the girls that she trained remember her, and they know that they wouldn't be where they are now.
You can't take away her history just because she's an asshole. You can't. I mean,
Yeah.
history is history, no matter, no matter what.
And we've certainly seen plenty of men whose history as being an asshole hasn't impeded our celebration of them.
Exactly.
Which is why I thought that this would be an interesting character to talk about, an interesting person, because we always are happy to lift up women who have done great things and have been sort of the perfect minority.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, she was not. But does that mean we discount everything she did?
No.
I don't know. Maybe. It's like if Sweet Georgia Brown's daughter was asked in this documentary, which, by the way, everybody should watch. It's very cool. It's called Dark Side of the Ring, The Fabulous Moolah, and it's put out by Viceland. And Sweet Georgia Brown's kids talk a lot about what happened to their mother. And their daughter is asked, like, what do you think of her? And she was like, I have no thoughts at all.
Ah.
And I was like, the shade. But, I just thought this is a controversial person.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings up a lot of questions I don't necessarily think we need to answer, but to think about.
There's a quote that came, or like a comment that came into my head that Nick always says to me is never meet your hero. Because then you see and you hear the bad things about them, who they really are. Yeah.
I know it always makes me worried about, like we talked about Lizzo earlier. It makes me worried where we continue to lift her up higher and higher and higher until we believe her to be infallible, but she's not.
Mm-hmm.
She will make a mistake one day, and this towering love for her is going to crash down upon her. And we have to just remember that every one of our idols and heroes are still real human beings.
Yeah.
When I talked about Irina Sendler last year, and she was the woman who rescued a ton of Jewish children out of the Holocaust and saved their lives. But her daughter did not have good things to say about her as a mother. And, Dolores Huerta went through 1,000 husbands.
Yeah, she could not really make it happen in that realm. Yeah.
And she also was not home a lot. And so there might be people in her family, some of her kids, who think, nah.
Well, that kind of sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, she may have done these great things, but, she needed to be my hero.
Yeah. I needed her kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you where I got my information from.
All right. Oh, this was very, very interesting, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was like turned a fucking corner.
It did. There's a little twist happening there. And I know that one was long, but I felt like I couldn't just shove in. I didn't want to put that stuff chronologically in there because then it would be like, it didn't really come out until way late.
Yeah.
So I used Wikipedia and a New York Times obituary on her. There was also an NPR interview with her talking about that documentary that came out in 2004. She also has a whole page on the South Carolina Encyclopedia.
Wow.
The Bleacher Report, the Houston Chronicle, and the newspaper that broke the big, huge story about this whole Sweet Georgia Brown thing and really got these allegations into the light was called the Free Times. You can still read that article it was originally published, I think, in 2005, maybe. And there was a recent one I read on Deadspin, and I used also a website called Slam Sports. And of course, just going to mention it again, I used clips from Dark Side of the Ring, The Fabulous Moolah, which was a Viceland documentary.
I love Viceland, by the way. They make great stuff.
They do. It's always intriguing. And they have this Dark Side of the Ring is a whole series. They have a whole bunch of them.
Oh, wow.
So this just happens to be the one on her.
The one on her.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
All right, lay it on me. Who you got?
All right, so the lady that I'm going to be talking about today is Freda Diesing.
No, I don't know her.
She's a master carver, painter, tireless educator, and a champion of First Nations art and culture.
Ooh, this is exciting.
Hell, never heard of this lady. And so, like I had mentioned before, it was really hard to find a lot of information on Freda. It's usually fairly easy, and we've mentioned this before, to find information of their accomplishments, but it's like, where did they grow up? Or, you know, they don't have those little things that I feel like turn these women into somebody maybe we can picture. So I did my best. And I really liked her. The stuff that I did find out about her was really cool. So Freda was born in Prince Rupert, British Columbia in 1925.
Oh my gosh, it's so weird when
I
we
know.
have like the corresponding time.
As soon as you said that, I was like, oh my God, our ladies were alive at the same time.
Weird.
And she was a member of the Sadsuganalanis clan. I might have to go back and figure out how to pronounce that. I even went to like Google how to pronounce. I was like, how to pronounce in this language. And we'll get a little bit further into this, but this clan and this culture, their language is being lost.
Oh,
So finding out how to pronounce it was
almost
impossible.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, no disrespect. I know I'm probably saying it wrong, and I acknowledge that. This clan is a branch of two First Nations of the Haida Indians. Haidas are the indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest coast. Their homelands are the islands near the coast of southeastern Alaska and northwest British Columbia. The word Haida in their language means person, which I thought was very it's nice. You're just a person.
I'm just a person.
I'm
That's
just a
Tig
person,
Notaro's
yeah.
tagline. I'm just a person.
Really?
Yeah, you know who she
Love
is, right?
Tig. Yes.
Yeah, she's going to be here, this Saturday.
I do.
I'm going.
So the two separate Haida communities are called Maset and Skidigat. She had a Haida mother and a Swedish father who died when she was 2 years old. Her mother, whose name was Flossie, remarried and moved the family to a 10-acre area of bushland near Terrace in British Columbia. When her mother remarried, she was only 4 years old, so she didn't really have too much of a memory of her father.
Yeah, being like a parentless child.
Exactly. So Freda's family grew up really simple. I mean, 10 acres of bushland. And they were cracking into this raw. Like she had a story of them just like clearing out brush and creating a home and this area where nothing was out there.
It's always impressive when people do stuff like that, but I
Yeah.
also think they're a little bit crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
I'm reading the memoir Educated right now by Tara Westover, and it's set in Idaho. And it's these people who do that in the 90s. And I'm like,
Nah.
no thanks.
So Freda's family grew up really simple, and she recalled wearing dresses made from bleached flour sacks. And when she got her first store-bought dress, she remembers was for her 11th birthday.
Wow.
Yeah. And I love the flour sack dresses because my mom used to have flour sack dresses because they used to come with this cloth that was printed with really pretty flowers. And it wasn't just a plain white, no nothing piece of cloth. And my mom actually still has an apron that her mother made her from little scrap pieces of flour sack.
That's really cool.
It is really
that
cool.
kind of like family history is really neat.
Yeah. She said she was 12 years old when she first attempted to carve. She enjoyed carving, but her heart really was in painting instead. So she ended up studying and painting at the Vancouver School of Art, after which she developed an interest in her Haida heritage. This spark lit. She spent a lot of time with her paternal grandmother, and she said that her grandmother contributed to her interest in learning about her past, like her ancestral history, basically.
Yeah, her cultural traditions. So was her mom not traditional at all?
It didn't really say.
She must not have been if she was probably a product of the boarding school system.
Yeah.
Where they were like beaten if they ever tried to do anything, like speak their language.
That is like a story told over and over and over of taking these people and wiping out who they are so that they will assimilate.
Yes. Colonialism.
Yes. And in that area where she was from, it was a coastal area where they were doing a lot of fur trading. That's like way back in the day. Of course, Alaskan fur traders were a
Yeah.
big part of that. And so there was a lot of that colonialization because it was a
Yeah.
port to
Mm-hmm.
bring in all these furs and trade and things like that.
And white people like to make money. They're greedy.
Yes. So she said this spark to get into her Haida heritage also was lit when she saw an exhibition of Native art at the Vancouver Art Gallery called People of the Potlatch and a piece of work called Arts of the Raven. Freda realized the loss of her culture around her. Not only were these ancient practices of like drawing, painting, carving, weaving, jewelry making, that they were starting to dwindle, but that their own language was being lost. People were not speaking it anymore. Carving was a tangible connection between her people and their land. And she felt it was vital to continue the practice to keep the connection between her people's history throughout the generations. I mean, this is what they did. And they
Yeah.
were big, like canoe makers and totem poles and these beautiful time consuming pieces of art that they would do as a community. You know, they would sit together and they would carve this as, you know, one kind
Yeah.
of thing. So she was accepted as one of the first students at a new school called the Gitanma School of Northwest Coast Indian Art in Hazelton, BC. Once again, I apologize if I pronounce that wrong, in the Gitxan territory.
I'm already so in love with this woman.
There she received instruction from an art historian, Bill Holm, and began learning and working with First Nation artists Tony Hurt and Robert Davidson. She began her carving career at the start of when she was in her early 40s.
Whoa.
That's when she was like, I think this is important. Like for her, she was a wonderful painter. She was a wonderful artist, but she felt like carving was what connected all of the different tribes. Because like how I said, there were 2 branches.
Yeah.
And all of these branches broke off to clans, and all the clans broke off to villages. And so all these people had all these different little separations, but it all led back to that one piece. And a lot of it was their artwork. Like they all kind of had the same traditions. So with this small handful, and I mean small handful of Indigenous artists, they were responsible for the reawakening of the Northwest Coast arts and culture. And they called it their Renaissance.
Wow. It's like the Harlem Renaissance.
Yes. And so she worked with other master artists as one of the first female carvers on the modern Northwest Coast. Some of the work she created were ceremonial masks. If you've ever seen the wooden masks, and they'll use like a little bit of twigs and leaves and things to create hair. And I'll include later too some images of the artwork. I feel like when you go to in Washington, when you go to Seattle, there's a lot of Alaskan artwork
Yeah.
that you can see, similar to like that very line form art of whales and eagles and
Yeah, the Pacific Northwest. So I didn't grow up here. So that all of that tribal art and tribal iconography is all new to me
I
relatively.
keep forgetting that you're not from here.
Yeah, I'm from Montana, and so our iconography is based on buffalo, hills, mountains, lots of like beading
Mm-hmm.
and really just elaborate dresses and stuff like that. So totally different.
Yeah, well,
I mean-
coastal art, the native coastal art is very connected to the landscape of the coast. So the birds, the fish,
The whales,
the whales.
the salmon.
Yeah, exactly. So some of the work she created, the ceremonial masks and totem poles, which often depicted in her work female forms and figures, which was very original and unique representation of Northwest Coast folklore. It hadn't really been done.
Represent.
She also created textile works, which included blankets, robes, incorporating traditional First Nation forms and designs. She explored silkscreen printing, and was later commissioned to do a wall mural for the Prince Rupert General Hospital back in BC, where she was born, which is really cool. In 1980, her work was recognized and included in the groundbreaking exhibition titled Legacy, Tradition and Innovation in Northwest Coast Indian Art. And This was assembled by the Royal British Columbia Museum, and it was to be exhibited internationally, which was a big, huge step in her career because not only was she doing it in the US, it was going to see the world, which
Wow.
I think is fantastic.
And what year was that again?
This was in 1980.
Okay, so by now she's in her 60s.
Yep.
Or almost, I guess.
So the goal for the exhibition was to bring awareness and appreciation of their culture and their art and their history. Freda focused on her Haida heritage throughout her whole art career, and she started teaching and sharing her knowledge and techniques. She would teach at seminars, she would teach in classrooms, and her biggest goal was to push young First Nation artists to connect with their heritage and create art the way their people had been doing for generations.
I love that.
Right?
She's like single-handedly trying to bring back an
Saving-
entire cultural
Yes.
tradition.
So she also went to serve as an artist in residence. I had to look that up. I was like, what is an artist in residence? And so basically you're invited to reside in like
A place.
a place, and then you're there sharing the specific artwork that you do. So you're teaching as well. So she ended up going to the Dominican Republic.
Oh, interesting.
Very. And then she also went on to participate in a sculpture symposia in Finland. So she got to get out of her little coastal
Yeah.
town, which was cool.
I have a really good friend who's a Cherokee artist, who's an artist. She has a standing artist in residence position at Yellowstone every summer,
Oh,
which is, I think, really amazing.
that would be awesome.
Yeah. Her name is DG House. You can look her up online, guys.
So friend and student Dempsey Bob described her as giving and sharing. She was non-judgmental, and she had a very gentle teaching style. So here's a clip of Dempsey Bob talking about her.
When we started, there was no teachers. Freda was the only teacher. And so Freda was our school, and we had nowhere else to go. And I realize now she gave us, the tools to find out what we want to learn and to learn our heritage. I felt that Freda never got her full recognition as an artist. So we wanted to honor her and name the school after her. And the school is still going. Freda was smart because she realized what was going to happen if we did not teach. We were going to lose it again.
So Freda would go on to receive many honors and awards. She was recognized by the National Aboriginal Achievement Foundation, and this foundation is now called Indspire. So it's like a play on the word
Indigenous, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Who awarded her with a National Aboriginal Achievement Award in Winnipeg in March of 2002. That same year, she also received an honorary doctorate from the University of Northern British Columbia in May 2002.
So she's like 80.
Yeah. 77.
Wow.
So sadly, this same year, Freda was tragically killed.
Oh,
She
shit.
was involved in a single vehicle accident. She was apparently alone in her pickup truck and lost control on an icy road and crashed and died.
Oh, no.
So in 2006, in her honor, and to continue her legacy, Dempsey Bob and I believe one of the other people that she had taught and a couple of Dempsey Bob's family members put together, raised money, and started a school called the Northwest Community College, and they created the Freda Diesing School of Northwest Coast Art. It's located in Terrace, British Columbia, and named in her honor.
That's really beautiful that
So-
they would pull that together for her.
Instructor Ken McNeil says this about the school.
If you don't know your own culture, then who are you? And that's basically what it comes down to. And you can't buy that information. It's very realistic and human to want to find these things out, and to bring it out in art is even more fantastic. The greatest accomplishment I feel is to see our students participating in cultural events, using their skills to enhance their people, their tribe, themselves, their family, and bringing everybody together in a unity of art.
Oh, I like that.
And so at this school, there's a lot of people that Freda had taught and people that knew Freda.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are continuing to teach her style and her technique of what she learned.
Oh.
And the school, there, in the video that I'm going to give you the link to, the school is beautiful. It's amazing. And they offer like a fine arts degree, and they have like elevated degrees. And like in the video, the people that are in there are such young indigenous people. I'm just like, oh, thank God. Like they're just really connecting to who they are as people and what they can turn around and do with that. It's like the sky is limitless. I was watching this and I was crying today. I got a little emotional because there's been so much taken from so many people,
Yeah.
and especially Native people. It's not fair. And just like that instructor said, if you don't have your culture, especially for people of color
Yeah.
and indigenous people, you lose your identity. You don't know
Totally.
who you are. And I know what that feels like. And I'm just so glad that her influence is able to piece that back together for them.
Yeah.
So there was a student that was interviewed, and we'll include this clip as well. Jamie Davis says this of the program based on Freda's teachings.
It's like we can feel our ancestors watching us, and I just know they would be proud of us that we're still practicing our art form. You know, we're keeping it alive. We're still here.
Yes. And I want to include a little side note that I love. The Haida people have kind of a more like an Americanized name, and then they have their own like name given to them by their clan. And the Haida name that she got to have was Scale Kuwat, which means magical little woman. I love
so
that.
sweet.
And I love that too, when her former student said that she was non-judgmental,
Yeah.
because I, as a student, used to get very frustrated, and the teachers that would not, be like, well, just get it right, or just do this, or like kind of cut you off. The ones that were a little more gentle were the ones that still stick in my head. Like I still remember those teachers' names. I still remember their faces, and I still remember moments where they were very gentle with me and it was necessary.
Yeah. I wanted to come back to that after you played that clip, just to be like, that is the kind of teacher I wish or aspire to be, because it's really hard to be that way. It's just difficult to like slow down and just let them work their way through it and hold their hand, but not necessarily show them how to write. So yeah, I thought that was really cool and admirable of her as a teacher.
Well, especially if you don't process your frustrations properly. Like what if those people put those tools down? Like who are the
who's
other
going to pick them
people?
back up?
Yeah, and who's going to lose out on the art that you might have created and contributed to the world?
I wanted to mention a podcast because we're talking about this Indigenous artist. And this woman's not an artist, but there's a woman named Rebecca Nagel, and she is a Cherokee woman who has a podcast called This Land, which is really, really good. And it's all about Indigenous land in the United States and how there's a Supreme Court case right now that's going to be heard in the next session that could potentially change everything we know about Indigenous land and reservation systems in the country for the worse for Indigenous people.
Oh, no.
So you should totally listen to it. It starts out with a murder. So if you're into true crime, you can start there and then learn a lot about Cherokee land, Cherokee culture. And she specifically is trying really hard to learn the Cherokee language because same issue. It's in, I think it's like she said on her podcast, I think it was in like 2 generations or 3, or like not even that. I think it was in like 20 or 30 years. There'll be no people left who are fluent.
Wow.
And it is very difficult to maintain traditions and cultures when you don't know the words to them. Like there was a guy on her podcast who was talking about how there are certain words for phrases and stuff that he will say that there is no equivalent in English.
That is the same with the Haida people.
Yeah.
Like they were saying there's no way we can translate this for you. This is a word that is ours, and we can't can't translate it. There's no English other side of it.
Yeah, it's not like a 1-to-1 translation. It's not like flowers, flora.
Right.
It's totally different. It's a whole concept that does not exist in English frame of, like, an English language, but also because it doesn't exist in a frame of mind.
And the Haida people are really fascinating because there's so, like I said, the branches break off and then it breaks into clans and villages and different tribes. And so all of these people that are creating this artwork and in sharing this space, they'll be like, I'm from this clan over here and I'm from this clan. And they're bringing different images that represent their own families and creating artwork from that together, which is really cool. It's not just one blanket thing. There's just not just coastal natives and that's all that they are. And I think a lot of people...
There's diversity amongst a tribe. Yeah.
Exactly. And I wish people would see that a little bit more. It gets me and my husband riled up because they'll be like, isn't your husband Mexican? And I'm like, no, I'm Mexican. My husband's Spanish. And they're like, what's the difference?
Oh my God.
And I'm like, the fucking ocean.
Continents. Entire colonial histories.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, and that was something that was always really irritating to me. It was called Pan-Indian. It's this Pan-Indian image, and it, like, Hollywood is the worst. Everybody is a Plains Indian. And they all look one way, and they all sound one way. They all the same. Way. They all have teepees. They all, hunt buffalo. And it's like, guys, that was like the middle of what is now the country. And then on the coasts and in other areas, we're completely different. It's like, it's just crazy to me.
Look it up. Well, let me share where I got my information. So I went to spiritwrestler.com. I went to, the college that has this course offered with Freda's teachings is www.Coast Mountain College. They have a wonderful website, and also they have like everything that you need there. You can look into the programs, you can look at the artwork, you can see the teachers that are there. It was really just fun and fascinating to go through. I was like, I want to go to this school. And then www.bigoran.com.
She's going to throw that www in there in case you're not familiar.
It's
World Wide Web.
Leave me alone. God damn it.
I gotta like poke you a little. www.
Revolvi.com. And I took a little bit from Wikipedia. There wasn't a whole lot on there about her.
Yeah.
There is a book that was written about her. I kept seeing a cover and it had her name on it, but it wouldn't say who the author was. It wouldn't say where I could find it. They were just like taken from this book about Freda Diesing's life. I'm like, I can't, so I'm not going to even, I don't know if that book exists.
It's a phantom book.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for sticking around for our longer episode, but that's okay because I think we had some really amazing women to talk about and one who was controversial.
Nothing wrong with a little spice.
We do hope that you are liking, subscribing, and sharing and all of the things that we asked you to do because we are really working hard at this and we want to make it better for you. And we want to thank Lucas McIntyre. What?
Hi, Lucas. Thank you.
Thank you for being our editor and helping us stay on track. And also thank you to Jennifer Finch, who wrote and recorded the song
Shirley
with L7, and they released a new album this last year, so check it out.
Thanks for listening, guys, and sticking with us.
Peace.
Bye.